So welcome to Inside the Salesforce Ecosystem, where we deep dive with the experts and trailblazers shaping the future of Salesforce. I'm your host, Luke White, and in every episode, we explore the unique journeys, challenges, and insights of those who make this ecosystem thrive. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Wesley Bik, Salesforce Consultant at Brightfox Netherlands. So Wesley, thank you very much for joining us and carving out some time in I know it's a busy agenda that you have. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me today. Very happy to be here.
Absolute pleasure. So let's dive in. So can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your role as a Salesforce consultant?
Yes, of course. So yeah, you already introduced me. So my name is Wesley Bik, and I'm a Salesforce consultant for 4+ years now. And now already 2 years at Brightfox as a Salesforce consultant. And really just rolled into the system. So that's nice to be here now.
And so how did your journey begin in the Salesforce ecosystem? Like obviously you said 4 years in the ecosystem, but where was your background before? What brought you into the wonderful world that is Salesforce?
Yeah, well, that's quite funny because after I graduated, I did a traineeship actually in marketing consultancy. So I just rolled into the wonders of HubSpot, email marketing, stuff like that, and then started to find my way into CRM systems, and then stumbled, of course, upon Salesforce and other systems, so as Microsoft or stuff like that. And then we did some implementations in Salesforce, and I really started to enjoy the ecosystem, and then found out a little bit more about Trailhead and got a little bit more excited about it. And then after 2 years, I thought I want to completely focus on the Salesforce ecosystem. And that's why I work at Brightfox now. I found them and now doing a lot of Salesforce implementations. Yeah, so that's a little bit the journey that I had so far.
Okay, interesting. Where do you see some of the parallels from sort of like the marketing consultancy to the Salesforce consultancy? It's an interesting, juxtaposition to have those skill sets now. Do you see some lap over, some crossover as well?
Yes, definitely. I think it really helps when you want to understand the processes of the customer. It depends if they want like a marketing process or that there's really a business process that they would like to develop into the system. So I think that really helps with that type of consultancy background that you first learned how to understand the process, and now I'm more on the part how can we implement the process into the ecosystem that Salesforce provides.
Okay, yeah, it's interesting. And so in that sort of 4 years, how have you seen, or what changes have you seen in just in the Salesforce community and ecosystem in that 4 years? Have you seen big changes, or what's your input, no, what's your feeling on that over the
Yeah,
years?
well, I think the biggest change for me, and I think because I'm not that long in the ecosystem, right? I think 4 years. I saw the change from process builder, workflow rules, developing into flow. I really like Salesforce Flow because I have not a technical background, but more like a drag and drop kind of background. So that's what I really liked about Flow, that you can actually learn to automate those processes, and that's the change that I saw really in there.
And there's also this AI thing that might be the future. I think that's coming. I
Yeah,
think, yeah, they talk about it somewhere occasionally,
yeah.
but
They mention it sometimes.
they mention it, yeah, just in passing sometimes, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So within that 4 years and the flow, when you speak to colleagues who have been your colleagues that have been in the ecosystem longer, I've heard of that some people were quite sad when the process builder left and like, oh no, I've got to move everything to flow. But
Mhm.
did you hear any of those conversations when like flow was really being pushed and they were starting to get rid of the process builder? Do you hear some of your colleagues saying, oh,
Yes,
I
of
don't know, I've got
course.
to do
Yeah.
everything on flow?
Yes, of course. Of course, that you had the migrate button, right? So that you can
Yeah,
migrate those workflow rules and process builders to Flow. But still, it was a daunting task to migrate all those flows to the correct way of working right now. That's the most thing that you hear from colleagues. That
yeah,
it's a lot of work basically. But when you speak to my colleague now, that Flow is a really easy way to combine everything right now. So now I'm quite used to it, right? So I'm an
yeah,
advocate of Flow, but
yeah.
yeah, that's what you hear from your colleagues sometimes. Yeah,
Yeah, the ones who've been in the game a little bit longer, yeah, it's
exactly.
something else for them to do. But yeah, no, I think the benefits definitely outweigh some of those the challenges of some of the migration stuff that comes through for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think that does enable then to, yeah, more people to be able to be a consultant because you don't need that the same level of pure technical background. And I think that's
Yeah.
where sometimes I think, especially hearing from your background now, much more functional background, which I
Yeah.
think is what a lot of customers need to be able to understand. Hey, I need to do this thing, but how do I do
Mhm.
it in Salesforce? And I think that's where like people like yourself really drive some value for the customers and their Salesforce implementations.
Exactly.
Um, so what's your sort of typical day look like? What sort of have you got any routines or habits that help you stay productive? I'm assuming that you guys predominantly work from home as well, so that remote
Yeah.
working obviously is now a common thing, but wasn't so much. So how do you
Yeah.
manage all of that?
Yeah, that's quite funny because when I started working, the COVID just started. So for
Yeah,
me, it's quite normal to
yeah,
actually work from home. But we have at Brightfox more a hybrid way of working, so that you have
okay,
2 to 3 days in the office or at the clients, and then 2 days you work from home. So yeah, what does a typical day look like? So it really depends, but in general, I start my day with a stand-up, depending on the project that I'm on, and then have a block of focus work where I can just work through my user stories or clarify a process more with the client. And then at the end of the day, that you can deliver your user story or maybe confer with a colleague. Okay, are you having any challenges right now? So that's basically a, a typical day for me. Of course, it really depends on how busy it is, but also if there's an incident or that you want to help with other colleagues. So it really depends on where you are within your day.
I remember in a previous life I was a CRM onboarding consultant, and I always remember those having, hey, look, this is what my typical day looks like. And then a customer will drop an email at 4 p.m. and you go, oh my god, that my day is
Mhm.
ruined now. I've got to jump and fight this fire and etc. like that. Just for my own curiosity, sometimes, and it's interesting. I always found that my mornings would be a bit quieter in terms of like emails from the projects I'm working on, because then I guess suddenly the customers you're working with, they're doing their BAU stuff in the morning. They get to the afternoon and go, all right, we've got this Salesforce project. Now I need to start pinging emails. So do you find the same where you can get a lot more work done in the morning and then afternoon sometimes get absorbed by those questions from your customers or the projects you're working on?
Yes, I think I can agree with you on that. In the mornings,
Okay.
it's more quieter, but I like that. When you're talking about your typical day. I would say it's my ideal day that you have your stand up
Yeah.
and then you have your focus work. But most of the time that works, and then in the afternoon you see that you get more pings about the user stories. But um, luckily, it's not something that has to be picked up immediately most of the
Yeah.
times because you're running in a project and you're trying to implement it within your user story. So yeah.
Yeah, okay, no, it's interesting. Yeah, I've always found that. I just always assumed that that was what it was. It was just that they were right. I've got to do these tasks. Now I can focus on that Salesforce project we're doing as well. So what's been the highlight so far of your Salesforce career? So the last 4 years, can you pick out one or a couple of highlights so far?
Yeah, I think I have two highlights. One at my previous job where I did like an implementation for a company that hosts events, and we connected multiple systems together. So we did a Spotler implementation there from the marketing background for email marketing, connecting it to the system where they can host their events. So I think that's one of my highlights because it was very early on in my career. And the second one was quite recently at Brightfox. We had an implementation for a big construction company in the Netherlands. And there we had the opportunity to start from basically scratch again. They had a
Mhm.
very old Salesforce org. I think it was set up in 2013, if I'm not mistaken. So there was a lot of cleaning up to do. So I think that is one of my highlights of my career because we also had all the aspects in there. So we had the technical aspect with Apex, but also set up the full CI/CD with a tool called SFDX Hardis. So I think that's the highlight because it had the full package for me.
Okay, that's interesting. So that, yeah, I've often found that sometimes, especially within Salesforce CRM world, is as a wider spectrum as well, that construction industries are sometimes still a bit behind when it comes to some of that digital transformation. Digital transformation has been a buzzword for probably 10 years, but there's still
Mhm.
companies going through it. So um, did the construction companies start to see some of those benefits of having that's everything lined up, everything organized, that digital transformation? Did they really start to see that, and did they become much more productive and efficient post go live as well?
Yes, what you see is that in the beginning, there's of course people that think, "Why should I do this? I can just write this down in
Paper's
my
fine.
notes, and
Yeah.
I will remember it." And then we also say, "Okay, well, what if a colleague needs you want to go on holiday, or you want to inform your colleague about a project that's running, and you're not doing one or two projects, but you're doing two, three,
Yeah.
500 projects in a year that come passing by." So that's nice to help them adapt to the system. And in the end, they see the benefit. But within this industry, you really have to show them first. You can
Yeah.
tell them all the theory and say that they can get X proficient and more efficient. And they say, okay, well, first I want to see it, and then I will believe you if it really
Yeah.
works like that. So I think that was a challenge as well there. But in the end, I heard some very positive sounds from the end users that they're really seeing the benefits and that they're actually redeveloping and adding more features to their current CRM system. So that's really nice.
Yeah, I think that's always where you can tell a project's gone well is they come back and go, actually, now we need this, now we need that. I think that's almost like a big rubber stamp of approval going, okay, this worked because they now want to do X, Y, and Z afterwards, for sure.
Yeah.
I always used to throw an example back and go a bit morbid maybe and say, well, what if you get hit by a bus tomorrow? Who knows
Hmm.
what? Well, everyone's going to be obviously very sad, but we still need to pick up the work afterwards.
Hmm.
So that was always the one. Like, okay, yeah, you've got a point. Yeah, it's in my notebook somewhere, and no one's
Yeah.
ever going to see it. So yeah. um, so what? Obviously, your role is very diverse of what you have to do, and every customer you work with is very different. And even though you're implementing Salesforce or Salesforce products, which sounds on paper go, okay, that's the same every time, but it's not. Every customer, every industry, every very very different. But what is your favorite part of the role that you have today?
Ooh, yeah, I think the favorite part in the end is when I'm actually working in the system. That's what I love the most right now. Working with complex flows, looking at new features that Salesforce has, or the extra additional project that products that you have, for example. That's what I really, really like. If I have to pick something, of course, I get the most energy when you do a project and the customer is happy and you implemented the feature that you work so hard on the whole process, but I have to pick one specific thing. It's working in the ecosystem, actually building something.
Okay, yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I again actually going from those functionals into the technicals and actually delivering it and actually seeing it in real life, and then you get to see the like you touched upon with the construction project you mentioned that light bulb moment where they go, oh yeah, this does do what we said it was going to do. So I think that's yeah, and it's a great yeah, it's the part I used to enjoy especially, and even today when our customers, when they see that moment, it's like, oh yeah, I click this button and it does do what I need it to do. That's a nice feeling for sure. Um, so obviously, you and I and everybody probably listening to and watching us today is knows how how active the Salesforce world is in terms of updates and what they're doing, what they're releasing, everything. So how do you? What's your approach on trying to keep up to date with all the Salesforce updates and then being able to tailor those solutions? Because in today's world, at the moment, we're talking about an awful lot of agent force and like
Mhm.
customers don't always know what it is yet. So how do you keep up to date with all of that stuff to be able to then help the customers with their questions about X feature they've seen from Salesforce?
Yeah, it really depends because everyone has a specialty in, of course. But for example, Agentforce, you mentioned it already. It's you hear it everywhere, right? But if you have to give me in one sentence the explanation what it actually does, it might get quite difficult to explain that. But what we do to keep, yeah, most updated is that the benefit, of course, of being a Salesforce partner, is that there's a lot of material already on all the new features that you can check it out. But also some practical workshops. I'm actually working on some Agentforce workshops as well, where I can learn how to build that agent or how to use Prompt Builder and how to implement it and find use cases for customers. So I think that's the way how we can stay up to date. Apart from, of course, what I have a thread that I created so that I can see all the new Salesforce news that it's coming in, what are new features, and then just have a quick read of all the headlines. And if something interesting pops up, I just save it and read it. So that's a little bit how I stay up to date. And like I mentioned in the beginning, is the Trailhead environment. I really like the Trailhead environment because I give you like a small quick look of some features. And if you really want to get into depth, you can go into those hands-on modes and dive into the system. So that's how at least we are trying to stay up to date. And yeah, if there's an inquiry of a customer of a feature that we don't know yet, um, I hit up Google, start with the documentation, and go on from there and use all those materials to get the information.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you. You know, we we go to a lot of the Salesforce events, so you see lots of updates and etc. And obviously, like yourself, we're Salesforce partnered as well, so we get all that readiness stuff. And Salesforce, I think, do a good job of having a lot of documentation out there, not just for client facing, but obviously for us who are behind the scenes in the partner ecosystem as well. And you touched upon Trailhead's great. I've got some younger family members, and I'm like, just go and have a play with Trailhead. It's always, you know, it's a bit of fun, and you get an idea of what it is in there. And I think it's easy to use. 9 times out of 10, it's easy to use, and there's some good content in there. So I think, yeah, Trailhead definitely. I'd always recommend anybody if you're thinking of getting involved in the Salesforce ecosystem or want to know more, then Trailhead is definitely a good place to start. And then the community that's around Trailhead as well is also very good as well. Um, so what we talk about, obviously managing in your role, you're jumping from project to projects. Obviously, there's probably situations where you have massive projects and you're sort of project
Mhm.
singular focused. But in those times when you're dealing with multiple projects, what strategies have you used to help you manage those multiple client projects while still delivering that consistent high quality results for them?
Yeah, I think it is difficult sometimes if you have multiple clients at once, right, to deliver the highest standard. So what I try to do, and when you have like 3 or 4 clients, that you can really schedule your day based on the client. I think that helps for me. So that you say on Monday I work for this client, on Tuesday for the other client, and so on and so forth. And of course, in real life that doesn't work because if client B wants to contact you on a Monday, you won't say no. But if you can at least communicate that and structure your week like that, you can actually manage multiple projects. But in my honest opinion, I would say focus on max 2 projects in a week. You can deliver the most quality because you're really into the material and the project that you're working on instead of focusing on maybe 4 or 5 different projects at once. But it really depends on your role as well, right? Because from a consultant perspective, I would say that, but you also have like managed service at our company. It's an all different perspective. You work on different clients that have questions that come up each day, so that's a different way of planning it.
Yeah, and I think especially in your role as a consultant, that yeah, you need to try to have that separate time for each project. Otherwise, they're going to start to blur into one, and then you deliver
Yeah.
something. I've done it in the past where I delivered this new field, and they've come back to me and gone, "Well, we didn't ask for that field." Then you go, "Oh no, that was for
Yeah.
the wrong, the wrong customer." So you learn quite quickly, I think, by that to go, "Okay, right, I need to just like this hour is going to be ring fenced just for this project to make sure I get all of that stuff done and done correctly as well."
Yeah, and time framing in it is the best way to do it. And I really found out that if you communicate to your client, I'm working on these days, and on other days I'm focusing on another project, they respect that boundary. And if there's really something that important, then they will get in contact with you, and that's no problem, of course. But then you can at least structure your week and focus on that quality that you would like to deliver, because you have to focus sometimes. You need some time to get into a task that you are doing.
Yeah, exactly. It's not data entry. You can't sort of like
Yeah.
zone out and just do it. You've got to use your brain and put all those practical skills into place as well. So actually, come back to communication. It's interesting. So I've always known that, you know, we have delays in projects, rollouts, etc. Delays happen, but I've always found that if you just tell the customer, "Hey, look, we've got a delay. It's going to be another week." 9 times out of 10, customers are like, "Okay, that's fine. As long as you've kept them up to date, they don't mind
Mhm.
if it's an extra week." So, with you, do you tend to handle that through email communication, phone, Slack, Teams, or is it a mixture? Does it depend on obviously project by project base as well, how the client wants to interact with yourself?
Um, it really depends. Well, I have the benefit that we always have a project manager. So
Yep.
if we have a delay, I go to my project manager and explain him or her why we have a delay. But if I would have to arrange it for myself, I would say first call your most important stakeholder, explain on the phone what is happening, and then afterwards I would confirm it by email so that you at least documented it for yourself. But that's how I first call someone, have like the human interaction first, so that you can explain yourself, and then afterwards you can just confirm it by email. That's the way how I would communicate. So it's a mixture of communications styles.
Yeah, I agree. I think that phone call is always important, especially if it's going to be not always good news. Yeah,
Yeah,
good news is easy to deliver by email sometimes, but yeah, the more
yeah.
challenging news sometimes is phone call. And then people tend to be much more responsive to that. They're not going to shout the phone down to you. They're not going to they're not going to misinterpret a tone of an email and all the stuff that can happen that way as well. Um, so if somebody wanted to become a successful Salesforce consultant like yourself, what insights or key skills would you emphasize that they hone in and focus on?
Well, I think it's a difficult one. If I would look at it from my perspective, I came from a more business background and then moved into the ecosystem. Um, I think those are the people I can give the best advice. My advice would be, if you're really interested in it, take a look at Trailhead, ask around people that are already working on it, and try to investigate as much as possible and learn, and maybe do traineeship at a company to investigate if it really fits you, and then just build up those Salesforce fundamentals. So get your admin certificate so that you get to know at least the fundamentals of the system, and then move on from service to sales class. So really the core, and then expand from that via Trailhead and hopefully your colleagues if you are working at a Salesforce company.
And so moving a little bit sort of on as well in terms of some more advice and information across what key what sort of attributes, and here talking about more the soft skills, so
Hmm.
not the Salesforce knowledge, because I think that's obviously incredibly important to make sure that you
Hmm.
know that. Otherwise, you're not going to build any trust with a customer if you don't really know how to spell Salesforce. That's going to be a
Hmm.
challenge to get them on board. But some of those like soft skills that people can learn. What
Hmm.
do you think some of those are important in the role that you have as a Salesforce consultant?
I think it's very important that you are good in active listening. And I know it's like a popular term to mention it like that, but if you really understand the problem of the customer, then you can translate it to your solution. And what you often see is that when you're in a conversation with your customer, you have a long conversation, but the essence is really small. And I think that's the key, so that you can put on the problem solving hat afterwards and say, okay, this is the problem of the customer. If you can really understand that and have that communication skill, that's one very good soft skill that you need to have if you want to be a Salesforce consultant, because you have a lot to do with people and processes. So that's one thing I would say. And also, we already touched upon it a little bit, is problem solving and time management. Really have that open communication and knowing when to solve what problem. I think that's the advice I would give.
So I'm interested to get your takes. There's another soft skill that I think is very important in a consultancy world as well. So I'll be interested to get your take on it as well. I think it's always good to be able to challenge the customer as well, and to go, okay, yeah, I understand the problem, but why are we having to? Why are you suggesting we do it this way? Actually, push back and make them think as well, because sometimes the customer isn't always right. I know it's a famous statement
Hmm.
that the customer is
Yeah.
always right, but actually, the customer isn't always right, and sometimes they don't know what they don't know. Do you
Hmm.
find that being as an interesting a good skill to be able to be confident in yourself and your knowledge to push the customer a little bit as well?
Yes, I think I can agree with that, because you're the expert for for the client. So I think it shows of great knowledge that you can say to the customer, okay, well, understand your problem. I have an example. I had a conversation with a customer, and he explained like a really difficult process, and how often is this used?
Yeah.
Once a year, okay. But this is the big process. Yeah, it's a big process, but we're talking about maybe in half an hour. Like, okay, I would love to build it because it's a process. We can build it. But how does it help you and the organization? I think you can invest the time maybe into other options. So I think if you have that skill, and you also feel that you can tell that to the client, because normally you just want to say, okay, yes, we can build that, and you make an estimation, and so on and so forth. But giving that feedback is very valuable. So I agree with you on that. That to have that skill.
Yeah. I think and it sounds sometimes counterintuitive, but actually it builds trust because they're like, oh yeah, they know what they're talking about, and you
Yeah.
get it. I think sometimes we have it with ourselves here at PDF Butler sometimes as well, where a customer will get hung up on an edge case, like whatever we can deliver with the tool, we'll do 95%, and they've got this one little edge case. And to your point as well, that. But that's just one process you do once a year. Do we need to invest the time on it now? We're actually going to fix 99% of the processes. So I think it's definitely something that people should be willing to do and learn to do. It's again, as we've both touched upon, it's not an easy skill, I don't think, to push back, because especially when you're more junior, I think it's very hard because you just think Mr. Customer is just going to tell me what to do. But it's an important one for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So as we wrap up, so now we sort of take out the Wesley from the Salesforce world. So what does life look like outside of work, and how do you maintain that work-life balance with a demanding role, and also because we work from home, it's very easy to turn the laptop on and get back to emails, etc. But yeah, what does life look like outside, and then how do you maintain that work-life balance?
Yeah, I think it all starts with that time management, right? So if you're not working, try to relax. What I do, I exercise a lot, so I like to run. I have a dog, so I'm going outside a lot. So that's really, really nice to keep that work-life balance. And I think when you're working on a project, most of the times you're not alone. So if there are problems within your project, there's always someone to fall back upon. So don't put that weight on your own shoulders, because um, it will be fixed eventually. And that's how you can maintain that work-life balance. So outside, do whatever you want. I like to exercise a lot and go out with friends. That's what I like to do. So when the laptop closes, it is closed.
Disconnect. Yeah, disconnect. I got into a habit very much of actually turning my laptop off, not just shutting it, turning it off. I know, okay, nowadays it takes 2 seconds to boot a laptop. 10 years ago it took a couple of minutes. But just quickly, I enjoy running as well, and I enjoy exercise. I do it a lot for my mental health, just to get out of the office and just to get out. So, have you done marathons? Have you gone? Are you looking at that? When you say runner, how far have you gone with it?
Yeah, well, I would love to do the marathon. I practiced for it actually. I trained for it, but then COVID happened. So I practiced up to 30 kilometers, so I can do that. But I did it together with a friend of mine, and he had a trip around the world, and he's actually coming back. So I made a deal with him. If he's back, we will do that marathon. So hopefully, the next one, we want to do the one in Rotterdam. We will participate in that. So I have a lot of training ahead of me.
Yeah. I did it. I personally did a half marathon back in April. The thought of still running for 3.5, 4 hours still scares me a little bit for the full marathon. But I'm aiming for one in April, the Brighton one here in the UK in April. I did enter London, but the ballot was crazy. It was 800,000 people applied for like 30,000 places. So it's like, okay, so I might do Brighton one, but it still scares me a little bit, the thought of running for sort of like 4 hours. But I will do it, I think, just to at least do one and then see if I ever stop again. But I think they're addictive. I found it to become a bit addictive as well. I've got a colleague, Andries, who's based in the Netherlands as well, who you'll know as well, who's run a few marathons. So I guess in the Netherlands it's better because it's fairly flat in the Netherlands as well.
It makes it easier.
It makes it easier as well. Well, hey Wesley, thank you very much for joining me today. It's a pleasure to have an amazing conversation with you. So best of luck, and I know our paths will cross from our two companies many times. But best of luck, and thank you again for joining.
Thank you so much for having me, Luke. Thank you.